Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Perry, to Gar Hurd. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it! Into Booker. Here's the three. Suzanne! Oliver, Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Bravo time! He got it! Suzanne! Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less. This is a show about the NBA with a Phoenix Suns focus. My name is Max, also known as Podcast Boy, and I'm joined as always by my friend and co-host. His name is David Nash. David, how's it going, man?
I'm doing good, Max. I'm glad we're keeping that moniker for you. I noticed you changed your handle back on Twitter, which is totally fair enough. But yeah, we need to keep Podcast Boy going for a little while longer.
It seems to be a nickname that's sticking. People call me that a lot still, so I don't know if that's going to go away ever.
Yeah, you just went to a Suns game yesterday, but maybe the first time that someone notices you and yells out Podcast Boy, that would be pretty incredible, I'm sure.
It'd be a life-making moment. It really would be. So today we're obviously going to react to the trade deadline, which was, I guess you could say, a bit of a flop for the Suns, but I think overall for the NBA it was a pretty good deadline. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, kind of, what would you rate it out of 10? I think for the Suns, as you said, you know, we did our preview episode and really not a lot of what we thought might happen did end up eventuate, although we did try and temper expectations a little bit there. But you know, I thought it was probably an 8 or 9 out of 10 for the general NBA. It was pretty crazy there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Particularly, I think the Tobias Harris trade was really the one that was crazy.
Yep.
And then also, if you're going to consider the Porzingis trade, which is well before, but still probably counts, right? That was also nuts.
Yeah, I went through because I think we discussed the Porzingis trade on our last pod because it had already happened, and I think there were 21 deals since the Porzingis trade to the deadline, Max. So it was pretty busy. And then, yeah, as you said, that Harris one, I think anytime you get a Woj bomb like really, really late at night, like that was even late at night where I was,
wow,
which generally means that it's like really, really late in the US. So that one always adds to the drama because there's only, you know, a few people up, and I even tweeted at you knowing that you'd be asleep that your boy Landry had moved teams.
I know, I can't believe they traded him. What are they thinking over there? But yeah, that's one of those ones, and we'll get into it more in depth later, but that's one of those ones where you read the Woj tweet, and it takes you like at least 30 seconds to even develop an opinion on it, because there's just so much going on.
Yep, and we're going to touch on that, you know, with the Sun stuff and some of those bigger deals is kind of, you know, your initial reaction versus what you get to after you start to, you know, have all the information divulged to you. I think we saw that with the Tyler Johnson, Ryan Anderson one. You know, that one was weird. It kind of took a while for the information to come through, so people were making all kinds of judgments on that one, Max.
Yeah, we might as well just jump right into that, I guess. Are we going to do any recap here? Just that we played Golden State last night. It was a fun game and we lost. It was
an encouraging one. I thought if they play like that for the rest of the season, we should be talking about, you know, more wins. But you were at that one, and you know that one might come up a little bit as we talk about Tyler Johnson here. But yeah, we're gonna jump straight in here, Max, I think.
Yeah, that was really our only Tyler Johnson data point, so I think we kind of have to talk about that. But yeah, let's go over the deal first. So not very complicated here. Ryan Anderson goes to Miami. Tyler Johnson and Wayne Ellington come back. We immediately waive Wayne Ellington. He's going to sign with Detroit, right?
It sounds like that's already happened, if not coming up, or already happened by the time people are listening to this pod, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think a couple of things colored this, and I think it's fair to characterize the initial reaction as probably negative for most Suns fans. Do you think that's correct?
And general NBA fans, because most Suns moves, you go straight to the negative, and you'll probably be right 9 times out of 10, I'm sure. But in this case, as we'll get into, I thought this was a pretty good move for the Suns.
So did I, and I think the two reasons why it was initially perceived as negative. First, it took Woj like forever and a half to report what the trade was. He just said it was Tyler Johnson coming, and everyone was disappointed by that.
Yep.
And probably assumed it was going to be, I don't know what they were, so maybe TJ and like Binder or something, which that would have been, probably pretty bad. But it was Ryan Anderson, who, is obviously worthless for us. It's a giant contract, so the money wasn't that big of a deal. And then the other reason why everyone got soured on it was because I think when Ellington came over, everyone thought, oh, hey, we're going to trade him for like a second-round pick or something,
Yeah, and I think that was probably the delay from Woj, and no one else was able to jump in. We didn't even see someone like Gambo jump in and beat him to the details. I've got a suspicion, I think I'm probably right on this one, is Ellington had veto power over the trade. So I think when the initial deal was probably agreed upon, they needed to get in touch with Ellington and his agent and have him agree to the trade, or else he could essentially back out and probably would have ruined the trade with the way that the salaries work. So that's why the Suns were essentially no chance to on-trade Wayne Ellington, because he wouldn't have agreed to come here just to be traded, anywhere in the NBA for maybe a second max. So it was really just a throw-in to make the trade work. It was really just Tyler Johnson for Ryan Anderson.
Yeah, I wonder if the Suns made this trade hoping Wayne Ellington would get on the phone with them and be like, yeah, I'm happy to play for you guys, get a lot of minutes. And then once they got on the phone, it was clear that wasn't going to happen, so they just agreed to waive him. That might have been how it went down.
Yeah, I'm sure they were, hopeful that maybe they could talk him out of it. He is a great shooter, and they probably could have offered him, some pretty extended minutes to help his stock for free agency. But at the end of the day, he's gone to Detroit, which I guess is a bit of a playoff bubble team, and they probably need his shooting, so probably not a bad spot for him. But we didn't really see this one coming, Max. We spoke about our preview episode, and, when we touched on Anderson, we thought that maybe he'd be included as a salary piece in a really big deal, but we probably didn't see a side move or a slight upgrade, which I'm a little bit disappointed we didn't kind of pick up on that, because it was a good move for the Suns and something that wasn't all that hard to crystal ball, but as we'll get into, I think they've essentially turned a non-playing guy at the end of the bench into a piece that they can really use for this season and next season too, Max.
David, how could we possibly be expected to predict this when Bill Simmons told us it was impossible to trade Ryan Anderson's contract?
That's very true. And just quickly, I went around the league looking for other players that this could have been. This probably sums up why Tyler Johnson for Ryan Anderson was the deal to get made. So if you look at similar deals to Johnson's, so kind of 2 years left at around $20 million, maybe with some sort of player option on the second season that the player is likely to pick up. You're looking at Alan Crabb in Brooklyn, Reggie Jackson in Detroit, Mozgov in Orlando, Bazemore in Atlanta, Biyombo in Charlotte, and Parsons in Memphis, Max. And that's pretty much a mishmash of guys the Suns just wouldn't want and would prefer to keep Anderson on the books versus guys that the other team wouldn't be taking Anderson on just to give those guys up, like Crabb and Bazemore and probably even Reggie Jackson, even though I wouldn't want the Suns to go after him. So Johnson really fits kind of perfectly in the middle there of like just being out of the rotation in Miami, but actually being a serviceable player for Phoenix going forward.
Yeah, I honestly think I'd probably prefer Tyler Johnson out of all those guys. And it's interesting because I don't know if you have, I've never considered the idea of Tyler Johnson on the Suns ever.
No.
It's just not something that's ever entered my brain. But once I actually sat down and thought about this deal, I think everyone's like, oh, why are we taking on more money for next summer? It's really not that much more money. It's like $3 million, a little over $3 million, isn't it?
3.6, yeah.
3.6, right. So I don't know if they're going to sign a better guard than him for $3.6 million as like a backup. Maybe but you're throwing darts at that point. I think Tyler Johnson's safer. You also get the added value of having him for the rest of this season to stabilize things.
Yep.
We'll probably in a second here move on to what we want to see from him on the floor. We saw a little bit last night. Some to be encouraged about, some not to be. But just in terms of getting an NBA caliber guard without giving really very much up at all, I think that's kind of what the Suns did here. And that's why I was surprised by how negative people were. I think it was really just probably colored by the fact that everyone was hoping for something better.
Yeah, I think that was probably the main reaction to it, is everyone was hoping for a Lonzo Ball type trade that didn't end up eventuating. But Tyler Johnson, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. A lot of people are negative about what the Suns, are maybe thinking for free agency this summer, and thinking that they're going to be able to get players that just aren't going to really even consider Phoenix with the amount of money that other teams are going to have and where those teams are placed. So this is just getting a guy in now. Again, as we say, can't repeat it enough, for Ryan Anderson, who was just going to sit on the end of the bench for the rest of this year and then probably be waived, maybe stretched, or maybe kept as an expiring as well. And you still have that same flexibility with Tyler Johnson. And, teams love expirings, but, in particular, I think we saw at this trade deadline, teams love expirings where the player can actually play too.
Right,
They might still get something out of that player, even though the eventual goal is to clear his money off the books and save cap room. So Tyler Johnson's going to be an asset even going into next season, just from that standpoint, because we should also touch on, I watch Miami quite a lot because I've got close friends who go for that team who have been great in kind of filling me in on what Tyler might be able to do for this team, which we'll get to with the on-court stuff. But, he was really out of the rotation because Miami just have so many players at that similar position. He's definitely not a Ryan Anderson type who couldn't get a game for Miami, purely because he sucks. That's just not the case.
Yeah, no, not at all. And like you just alluded to, we'll get to him in a second in terms of his play. But I do want to make just one more point on the whole contract thing. Mm-hmm. The only way you're getting a discount with Ryan Anderson as compared to Tyler Johnson is if you waive him, right? That guarantees, I think, in mid-June or whatever, or mid-July, sorry. So if you keep him on the roster, then he's going to be even more money than Tyler Johnson next year, right?
Yeah, I think it goes up to $21 million for Ryan Anderson next year. I think that guarantee date is July 10 off the top of my head, which they, I guess, agreed to essentially know where they're at in early free agency and whether they needed to waive and stretch Anderson, which was a smart move by the Suns. But yeah, I just think they gave up on that initial idea with Anderson. And I think one thing here that is worth touching on is the Suns are a changing course, and I know that's frustrating to people. It seems like a lot of inconsistent messaging, but they had ideas with Ariza and Anderson. They had ideas for this summer, and things haven't quite worked out, and it would be probably a bad front office to keep to the current plans that clearly not going to come to fruition, and instead we're seeing them, audible a little bit and try and come up with different plans and different ways to add to this roster. So, I think we're seeing them kind of move on the fly a little bit. The full-time situation with the GM isn't ideal, and hopefully that gets resolved pretty quickly. But, I think we're seeing a team that's pivoting a little bit here.
I really think James Jones is just the GM, and they haven't announced it yet. That's my opinion on the situation, but we'll see.
I'd be very, very surprised if he's not announced as the full-time GM, and I just do it now because it stops all the stuff that we see. It stops all the questions from the media. James himself got asked about it quite a lot post-trade deadline and had to kind of play a straight bat with that line of questioning. So, there's really nothing he can do as a GM externally between now and the draft, and you would hope that it gets made permanent before the draft anyway. So you just may as well do it now, Max.
Yeah, I guess the best argument for maybe the Sarver doesn't, is looking elsewhere is the fact that it hasn't happened yet, because there's not a whole lot of reason for it not to have if he is planning on naming him the full-term guy.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's get in a little bit to what we think TJ brings. So,
okay.
I've said multiple times now that I just think he's like a mediocre NBA guard. He does a lot of things okay. He's not the best defender. He's not the best shooter. He's not the best playmaker, but he's kind of just okay at everything. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot better than what the Suns have right now. So it's a pretty significant upgrade in my opinion. Last night he couldn't shoot. He couldn't hit anything.
Yeah, I think it was 1 for 11 maybe, I think it was. But
that's not great.
He was pretty rusty.
But you could still just kind of tell the way he could command the offense. He could dribble. One thing that really stuck out to me was how confident he was with his handle and with the ball in his hands, just moving around running the offense. He was confident.
Yep.
He looked like somebody who's been playing on a real team for a while and has been surrounded by real players. I thought the team looks more settled with him with the ball than they look with anybody besides Booker with the ball.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think my first point that I've got down here is to reiterate that, yeah, he's not a point guard, but if you're into the idea of point book, he's a pretty perfect guy to audition that with point book for the rest of the season because, he's 6'4", and as you say, he's pretty experienced as a point of attack defender. He's not the greatest defender, but he is actually pretty good. And, with this Suns team, he'll definitely stand out as a defender. And, anytime you get a guy from Miami, you're going to get someone who plays hard, has a pretty good work ethic. And, from stuff that I've seen from Johnson already, he's really ramming home the point of organizing the guys, organizing himself, and organizing the team on the floor. So he's definitely got the attitude of a point guard, even though some of his tools, his handle can be a little bit loose. And, he's not a natural point guard. He definitely comes as an undersized shooting guard to the NBA. But yeah, I just love his work ethic, Max, and his attitude. And he's found himself in a leadership role. Essentially, he's only 26 years old, but on this team with how much youth the Suns have, he's going to kind of be a vet for the rest of the season here and maybe even longer.
Yeah, you know what he is? The word that just sticks out in my mind, and it's kind of a silly thing to say because all these guys technically are this, but he's a professional.
Yep.
He's just a professional at what he does. He knows how to play NBA basketball as a guard, and I totally agree with you on the work ethic thing, and the thing about him on defense is he's not the most gifted guy in terms of like length and size or anything, but he's constantly trying. He was poking away some balls a couple times last night, particularly in the first half. Just getting in people's faces, making it tough on the other team. Like that's one thing the Suns sometimes have trouble doing is making it tough on the other team to score.
Yep.
They're bad at that sometimes. And Tyler Johnson just gets in people's faces. I really like him. I think he fits really well with guys like Oubre and Mikal. They kind of make sense together to me.
Yep. The one that stands out for me last night is where he got right up in Curry's face on the wing. And poked the ball up and then out-leapt him to get the loose ball from Curry, who was essentially typifying how the Warriors started out that game. Curry had no intention of jumping for that ball, and TJ just wanted it more, or Tyler, I should say, just wanted it more. We're gonna have a bit of trouble differentiating between Tyler Johnson and TJ Warren. I will note that his nickname on Basketball Reference is Bumpy, Max, if we want to go with that. So I'm
what the hell is that?
I'm gonna guess that maybe it's a really cruel nickname dedicated towards his complexion a little bit there, maybe. But yeah, I'm probably not going to roll with that one. I'm going to maybe just call him Tyler or Johnson. But
well, I had really bad acne in high school, so I'll never call somebody Bumpy. That's just rude. It sucks to have that going on.
Yeah, it's not one that I'm going to roll with, but there's been a few other comparisons or things. There's another cruel nickname that I'm not going to even repeat that I don't like that I've seen for Tyler as well, which I'm sure many people listening has gone with. But yeah, I think probably my question to you here, you brought up Bridges and Oubre there. So what's your ideal lineup? I think we're probably going to agree on this, and we might even agree that we're very unlikely to see this lineup, Max. But what would your starting five be, say, post All-Star, when everyone is healthy? Hopefully, fingers crossed, and they've had a little bit of a break, and Tyler's been able to learn the playbook.
The cross more than your fingers to keep Booker healthy. I think you're right. We're going to agree on this. I think it's Tyler, Booker, Mikal, Oubre, and Ayton.
Yep. And the lineup will probably see, Max. What do you think?
That, except for you can go ahead and put TJ Warren instead of Oubre.
Yeah, which is seriously disappointing, because if we think about the rest of the year, it should be auditioning and trying out a few things. I think we've seen enough from TJ out the four. We know what he's going to bring and what he's not going to bring. If they're really considering signing Oubre again this summer, for that money that it's going to cost, I'd really like to see him with the starters, Max, because that's the ultimate audition, and it's the ultimate audition as well of putting the right pieces around Point Book, because it's not enough to just say we're going with Point Book and see how it's going to go. You've kind of got to give him the right pieces to work with as well to see it at its optimal state.
Yep. Definitely agree with that. And I have sort of a off-topic, not really off-topic, tangent for you, though.
Yep.
Question. What'd you think about Bender and Ayton last night in that first quarter? That was a pretty encouraging sign for them, especially on defense.
Yeah, this came up just earlier, actually, with a friend of ours on Twitter, Jeff Allen, who is a Bender advocate. And, he was sort of raising that kind of first quarter in the game really showed why Ayton needs another, true big next to him, and Bender's really the only guy on the roster that fits that mold. So, he was kind of advocating for Bender continuing to be the starting power forward even when TJ Warren is back. So, yeah, I think, the points that he was making, which I think you're essentially trying to allude to here, is it certainly helps the rebounding. It helps just the overall length in the paint, and it allows them to play, I guess, a little more chaos ball ball on the perimeter, knowing that they've got those two behind them there.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see them try that a little more. Maybe not necessarily starting, but just do it. And then also Holmes and Ayton would be interesting to see together a little bit. I think that Igor's done a lot of experimenting, I think, but I would like to see him experiment with the four more with those big guys. That's something that we haven't seen very much of at all this season, but I mean, if last night's any indication, it was something they maybe should be trying to do more of.
Yeah, the thing that's really hurting Bender, and I noticed after his breakaway dunk last night that he wrung his hand out and he's got some strapping around that hand, but the thing that's really hurting him right now is the shot just sucks. It just is not falling at all, and it may have something to do with that right hand strapping, I'm guessing, because we saw last year he's a competent shooter from three, and it's just completely fallen off this season.
In the first quarter of last night's game, he missed like 3 or 4 that were like, man, almost all of them were like big ones that would have like mattered.
Yeah, and we've seen that a lot, and that would probably go a long way to convincing Igor to maybe keep going with it for a while. Whereas where Warren's back, there's obviously the ego thing, the paycheck thing, but we also can't just remove ourselves from the fact that Warren's been the best shooter from three, so that's why Igor's probably going to go back there more than anything. But swinging back to Tyler here to finish off the on-court stuff, he's a 36% shooter from three, and mostly off the catch and shoot. He can't really create for himself or create off the dribble, so that's a pretty good fit with Point Book. And what else do you think we can see? I think he was very rusty last night, as you said, 1 from 11 from the field, but also Igor just had to take him out in those important minutes because he just didn't quite know where to be or how to run the offense. But I think once he learns that kind of stuff, he's going to be an asset out on the floor, as you said, just with his confidence and willingness to penetrate and move the ball, Max.
I think he's going to play a lot on this team because Igor has been just searching for someone he can trust with the ball in his hands other than Booker. Mm-hmm. Like, all Igor wants to do is not have Booker play point guard. That's like the goal of his life. And this is like finally the first reasonable opportunity he has to do that without the team being awful.
Yep.
His previous option that he kept going to was obviously, initially it was Isaiah Cannon, which is terrible.
Yep.
And then it was Jamal Crawford, and it has been Jamal Crawford, which is obviously also terrible. And it was Melton when Melton was playing better and obviously was healthy.
Yep.
But now he has like the best option he's had all season to do that by far. To get Booker playing off guard, so I think we're going to see, 35 minutes a game out of Tyler Johnson. I wouldn't be surprised at all, would you?
No, I wouldn't be surprised, and it should also coincide. I tweeted this last night. As soon as Booker's healthy, it should really coincide with no more Jamal Crawford. I'd be very surprised
I hope so.
if we see much of him, because you'll all of a sudden have Booker and Tyler together, and then you'll be wanting to get minutes into Okobo and Melton as well when he's healthy. So, as you say, for the first time, Igor will have various options to go to, and I think he'll be pointing towards Tyler a lot of the time as the guy to throw out there in crunch time. But talking to some Miami friends of mine and watching, more of Tyler in the last few days, I think a couple of things I wanted to leave the listeners with the on-court stuff. He's really great in the open court. We didn't see a lot of that, but he's super athletic, a little bit under the radar from that perspective. And a lot of my Miami friends have told me that, due to Miami's pace, they play super, super slow. And as we know, Phoenix want to play really fast. So we might actually see an uptick in Tyler from that perspective because, Miami's offense and the way that they play didn't really suit Tyler down to the ground. And he comes off curls a lot too, which is just something that I wanted to add because, that's really in Igor's wheelhouse. And I'd look for that for Suns fans as they start to, build sets that actually include Tyler, because I think one thing we've seen when Booker's got the ball, there's not enough weapons in the offense to kind of use the space that's created by, all the gravity that Ayton and Booker have. So kind of look for TJ he's really great at coming off screens in the mid-range and kind of making use of that space with both jump shots and floaters too, Max. So that's just some stuff that we might be able to see from TJ for the rest of the season.
It's great. It's going to be great to see those two, Booker and TJ, play together. I was thinking the other day that about this trade, and I was thinking, man, I think this is the first time Booker's going to play with a capable NBA guard since the Bledsoe trade, and Booker was not very good back then. Like, he's been a lot better now.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting to see that his dynamic when he's, like you're saying, a guy who can actually come off curls and shoot. and they can play off each other. That's going to be really fun to watch. I think it's going to help Booker a lot. I think we'll see. I think we probably would have seen an increase in Booker's 3-point percentage going forward anyway. Because he's just a better shooter than he's been. But I think this is going to be a trigger for it. It's going to be a lot easier for him to get some of his shots off.
Yeah, we ran through all those guards in Did You Know last week, and I think it's a great point by you. Many people bring up Bledsoe, but as you say, Booker wasn't anywhere close to the player that he is now when Bledsoe was on the team. So, yeah, I think it's exciting, and as far as the on-court stuff goes, it definitely, while it wasn't the biggest splash before the trade deadline, it gives us something new to look at for the last 20-25 games of the season, Max.
Yep, it is at the very least that, and if it gets Jamal Crawford out of my life, I'll be very, very happy. Man, David, he was really bad last night, wasn't he?
He was really, really bad, and I saw a lot of Igor criticism with that. I think, that's always going to come as long as Crawford's playing and leads are being swallowed up by opposition teams. I guess I just thought that he didn't really have much of another option last night.
I was going to say that. I'm the number one Igor critic when it comes to Jamal Crawford. Even I understood that he kind of had to play him last night or somebody else.
Yeah, I guess I'd jump on the back of that to say I'll definitely be jumping on with everyone else with my criticism if we continue to see Crawford once this rotation's healthy, because there's just no reason for Crawford minutes going down the stretch, particularly when you add in that this stretch run should be all about the development of guys that are going to be playing next year, and I would suspect that Jamal Crawford isn't on the roster next season, Max.
I might have to just stop being a Suns fan if he's on the roster next season, David. I can't handle that anymore.
The last thing I'd just say on Tyler Johnson is I think it probably means we'll have about $15 million in space. You can get up to around 25 if they let Holmes and Oubre go. And then TJ has that player option, which would open up like $42 million if they can somehow manage for TJ to opt out of that. But I would say that is highly, highly unlikely. And
we're going to make it suck really bad to be here for him.
Exactly. So hopefully that's not the case. But as we said before, he'd be an expiring contract. And, we won't touch on it this episode because there's going to be many, many episodes in the off-season that we're going to be able to talk about what the Suns can do in the off-season. But, I think that this team, rather than the cap space, is probably going to be looking to make quite a few trades in the offseason. And, we saw just this trade deadline gone. Zach Randolph went in the Harrison Barnes deal. Jabari Parker was used in the Otto Porter Jr. deal. Chandler was used in the Tobias Harris deal. That's Wilson Chandler. And DeAndre Jordan and Wes Matthews were both used in the Porzingis deal. So, that just goes to show, expirings of around $15-20 million can be quite valuable when your team looks to make a splash with a bigger type deal. So I'd look out for that too with Johnson.
Yeah, so would I. And I do want to, before we move on, make one point I forgot to make. When you were talking earlier about how the Suns sort of, they've cut into their cap space for this. I actually think it's impressive that the Suns are viewing themselves honestly.
Yep.
And understanding that the $3 million extra next season into the cap it's more important to get a guard who's stabilized now and later than it is to have dreams about guys you're not actually going to get.
100%. And these last 20-25 games can actually be really important as a springboard for next season. So I definitely agree with that. But, pivoting to what they didn't do, I guess, at the trade deadline, Max, I kind of knew that we were done. There was a certain article from Dwayne Rankin, I think it was, the night before the trade deadline that basically said that TJ and JJ weren't on the block and that Lonzo Ball hadn't been spoken about with the Lakers and the Suns. I don't actually believe either of those things, but once that was being reported, I kind of took that as the Suns not really having anything in the works for the final day.
Yeah, I read that article more as like they just knew they weren't going to be able to trade them. Like they, everything. They basically talked to every team in the league that was talking to people. The whole market had been assessed, and they realized there was nothing out there for them. So to me, it was less that. It's less that, we're not trading these guys. They're off the block. They're untradeable now. More that, we know what's out there, and there's just no trades.
Yep, it was a bit of a PR push, I thought, to make sure that those guys didn't see their name out there too much, and also, I guess, to temper expectations going into the last day on Lonzo Ball to kind of say, we hadn't really spoken about him, so don't expect anything there. But probably the first One that did happen to look at and that I've seen Suns fans talk about is probably Markelle Fultz, Max.
Yeah, I saw some of that too. People, I think I think it wasn't an overwhelming response that the Suns should have gotten involved, but there were certain those out there who thought they should have.
Yep.
For the price. I'm not among them, man. I mean, I get the upside, I get that appeal. The Suns I don't think this is the right place for him. I don't think it would have made a lot of sense. I think when he would have played, it would have looked really ugly because, as everyone knows, he can't shoot. I just think he would have been a really tough fit on this team. Defense is pretty good, but I don't know, man. I feel bad for the kid, but at this stage, all you can really characterize him as a head case.
Yep.
And the Suns are not a place for head cases right now. I think he went to a better spot.
Yeah. I mean, I feel good for him now because I think there's been a lot of articles already written that Orlando are seeing this as a long-term thing and not going to put too much pressure on him. And that isn't what we would have seen at the Suns. He would have been another project with a high expectation to come in and contribute straight away. So I think he's kind of found a good situation. Mm-hmm. He's already tweeted himself as a 5 or 6 year old in a Magic jersey, so he's feeling good about himself, which is pretty cool. But all I would touch on with that, it was an OKC first, a Cleveland second, and Jonathan Simmons that went out to Philly. And I had a quick look at that. I reckon the Phoenix package that matches that the best is the Milwaukee pick, our own second, and someone like Troy Daniels. And at that price, there's absolutely no way that I would have traded for Markelle Fultz.
Yeah, I don't even think Troy Daniels would have been enough, right? It would have to been Bender, maybe? Is he enough money?
You would throw Bender in as salary, right. Yeah, but I think just in terms of the pieces that Philly got out of it, that would be a package that the Suns would have had to put together.
I think you made the big point, the right point here about Orlando just kind of being ready to take the long-term view with him. Orlando and Phoenix, even though Orlando's been rebuilding for a while now, and they're actually sort of like better than the Suns are right now, it still feels like they're in a very early stage of development, right? They haven't had their young star Booker for a while.
Yeah.
They just got Bamba and Isaac. Now they just got Fultz. It seems like they're more... I don't think there's a lot of pressure on them to contend in like 2 years, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. Whereas the Suns, I think everyone's ready for the Booker Dayton thing to work, and them just to be ready, right? And Fultz is not the piece for that.
Yeah, I think I like the move for them. I wouldn't have liked the move for the Suns. And, what we're doing here is we're looking at the deals that actually did happen and whether the Suns should have got involved, because you can look at, and we'll touch on a little bit about what didn't happen, but when you're, I guess, criticizing the Suns or critiquing what they did at the deadline, it's best to look at, what other deals actually got made as what might have been available to the Suns rather than pie in the sky stuff. So another guy we spoke about quite a lot was Nikola Mirotic, who landed in a perfect spot, but the price there was, Thon Maker and 4 second-round picks. So I think the Suns don't even have extra seconds at the moment. We've even got one owing to Brooklyn, I think, as part of the Jared Dudley trade. So that's another one where I guess it probably would have been a first, or maybe even a first and some to match that package that Milwaukee ended up giving up for him. So that's another one that we just, I guess, wouldn't have even been able to do. And, maybe he's there in unrestricted free agency in the summer, Max.
Yeah, 2 of those seconds also were Washington's, right? And like back-to-back years.
Yes.
And Washington's turning into a cesspool. So those are actually some pretty attractive second-round picks. I guess ours would be too, because, who wouldn't want Phoenix's picks? But, I'm with you. I think it would have taken the Milwaukee pick and our second, and obviously the match's salary was something.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't think it was realistic for us to go get Mirotic. So I'm not upset about the fact that we didn't.
Yep, and we only really saw 2 other point guards dealt. Shelvin Mack was one, which was essentially a salary dump to Atlanta, I believe, and he's going to get waived there. So the Suns might even, if they are interested, they'd be able to sign Mack without giving anything up. And DeLon Wright went in the Gasol deal, but I think the important thing there is that Toronto probably wouldn't have looked to have dealt Wright just in a sideways move for an asset. He really was the one of the prizes in that deal for Gasol, which we'll get into a little bit later. So again, I don't think the Suns were really in either of those ones. They could get Max still if they wanted, but that probably leads me to my question. Would you look at a guy like Mac as a buyout candidate, or with TJ coming in, should we just be rolling with point book and developing the point guards that we already have for the rest of the season?
I guess I kind of have a two-part answer here. First, I think a lot of it depends on how Tyler Johnson looks. Mm-hmm. If he takes hits the ground running with Booker and everything's great, and Melton comes back and he's awesome in the backup role, maybe there's not a lot of room for him. He's played pretty well this season, though. He's been a good player. I wouldn't be surprised. Here's the other part of my answer. I wouldn't be surprised if a contender-ish, playoff-ish team wanted him.
Yeah.
And he went with that route. Because generally, you don't see a lot of buyout guys signing with the worst teams in the league.
You do not. No. He will have teams, I guess, lining up to have him as insurance as their third point guard because he's a very capable floor general, I think. And, yeah, that's a good point by you, is you don't often see a lot of these guys get waived and then sign with one of the worst teams in the league, unless it's to maybe start or something like that for Shelvin Mack going into free agency. But probably my only criticism of the Suns at the deadline, Max, is there were a few power forwards traded, and for really not much at all. So what we touched on before with Bender potentially starting with Ayton and how much that did or does help DeAndre Ayton in those starting minutes. I probably would have liked, you see JaMychal Green, for instance, go in that Avery Bradley deal, which was basically a nothing move for
that trade made no sense to me at all from anyone's perspective. It's just the weirdest trade I've ever seen in my life.
Really, really weird. The only thing that made sense is the Clippers, who had a very smart deadline, and you keep touching on just how smart they have been with Jerry West being involved. They essentially get off $2 million of Bradley's money next season, which isn't huge, particularly if you stretched it, but it's $2 million that they don't have to spend and now have in cap space, and it looks like they're going to go maybe all in the summer for some of the big time free agents. So that was, I guess, the main motivation for the move. I don't know why Memphis did it at all, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, when you see that kind of price point, I wouldn't have minded going for someone like JaMychal Green. The other guy who went was Bobby Portis, who had a massive night in his first game for the Washington Wizards, and he's another big time energy player that
I picked him up in fantasy, and I'm very excited about it.
But again, that was like DeLon Wright. I think that was a throw in a quite a big deal, so you probably wouldn't have been able to get him on his own. But maybe JaMychal Green is the one miss the Suns potentially didn't go for here at the trade deadline, which wouldn't have cost much at all and would have been a good look as a starting power forward.
Would have been great. Isn't he shooting like 40% from three this year? That would have been a really nice fit next to and decent defender too.
Yeah, always been a really big fan of JaMychal, and I think Jaren Jackson coming to that team and some injuries kind of made this season not the greatest for him. But Green at that price I think would have been a good move for the Suns. So I think that's probably...
So the thing there, though, is like we both have said we have no idea what the hell Memphis was doing, right? They traded JaMychal... I don't think we even stated the trade yet. They traded JaMychal Green and Garrett Temple, right?
Correct.
So why the hell do they want Avery Bradley? Avery Bradley is like really, really bad. Are they trying to just like teach... who's the young guard from Virginia they got that we loved in the draft?
Carter?
Yeah, they're trying to have Avery Bradley just teach Javon Carter how to play. I just don't get it. It's so weird to me. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, really weird deal. And probably a good way to pivot to, what didn't happen at the deadline. Because, our number one guy was Troy Daniels, which we thought the Suns might get off for a second round pick or something. But we didn't really see any of those deals. I think James Ennis was probably the only legit guy going out to a team for a second round pick, and even that had some tax implications for Houston, so that wasn't even a straightforward giving up a guy for a second round pick. So yeah, I think that Memphis deal was really, really weird for what they took back, but I guess guys like Temple, JaMychal Green, Troy Daniels, all these other guys just didn't really have a market, and I think that's got a lot to do with the way that the buyout system is going, Max, which I'll touch on a little bit later in 7 seconds or less, but I hate that rule, and I hate the way that the NBA is set up, and I think it's another thing where players and agents have way more power than what they should. Teams just can't trade guys anymore like that for even small assets at the deadline.
Yeah, the buyout rules, I agree with you. The buyout market's a little ridiculous. I don't like it either. I also think the other half of this is it seems like teams are valuing their second round picks more than they ever have before.
Yep.
I think the teams are either getting smarter or at least think they're getting smarter and think they can find guys in the second round.
Yeah.
So that seems to be what's going on. For example, the Mirotić trade. I cannot remember a trade where a really solid, valuable player got traded for 4 second-round picks. That's not something that usually happens.
No, and if the other offers, I think, and I was going to touch on this later again, I think Toronto was maybe sniffing around Mirotic, and maybe that was their first or something. And if you're the Pelicans, you probably take Stanley Johnson and 4 seconds over a crappy first-round pick. So that was an interesting deal. But yeah, Daniels wasn't traded, and the Suns will essentially hold on to him for the rest of the season now, I suspect. And, Warren was the other one. I hope the Suns at least sniffed around for what might have been available, even as a bit of a data-grabbing exercise for maybe the draft time and the summer for what his value might be. But it's kind of hard to see a trade like Warren's if you look at the rest of the deals that were done at the deadline.
Yeah, teams aren't trading for contracts like Warren's for players who aren't stars. That's just not something that's going on.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising to me they didn't trade Warren. I almost guarantee you they were trying. You made the point earlier, Dwayne Rankin's article coming out that night. I think that was a sign to him. We're not trading you, Warren, even though we've been talking about you for weeks.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm glad you come back to that because, I think that was definitely what that PR push was. And probably the last group of things that didn't happen is for all the rumors, we didn't see Rubio moved. We surprisingly didn't see Conley moved after they moved Gasol.
Yeah.
And both Drew Holiday and Lonzo Ball stayed put after the AD stuff, essentially came to a standstill. So no real surprises there other than maybe Mike Conley, Max?
I'm moderately surprised with the Conley thing. I think they were trying to move him. They just weren't getting the kind of offers they thought they were going to be getting.
Yeah.
And I think they probably actually think, and so this happens sometimes, even though he's older, I think when he has another year kicked off his deal and he's in next year, he might actually have a little more value.
Yeah. And speaking of PR moves, there was a push pretty much straight away at the deadline that it was all about him being a mentor for Jaren Jackson, which I'm sure he's a good leader in the locker room, but I don't think that's the sole reason why you don't move him if you've got capable deals on the table. So yeah, I think to your point, I think there'll be a market again. So definitely one to watch going into the summer with Conley and probably Rubio too. I think those rumors initially really surprised me and may hurt the relationship a bit long term. So for someone who is keen on Rubio on the Suns, Max, I'm not too worried about him not getting moved at the deadline because I think he's probably out of Utah and he'd be one of my main targets if I was the Suns with that, $15 million in space that they're likely to have.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're going to be talking a lot about Ricky Rubio in the next couple of months, and especially for free agency, because I think he's going to be somebody who's linked to the Suns constantly, given the Eeyore connection.
Yep.
Given the obvious need at point guard, given his skill set, I think with Booker makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So we're going to be hearing about him a ton.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably just ask you if your number one target for point guard has changed at all post-deadline, Max, or if you're still honed in on the same guy. I'm definitely honed in on Rubio for now.
I don't know yet. I need to see the draft. The draft is going to be it's always key.
Yep.
But I need to see what happens there because, there's a chance they end up drafting Ja Morant. That'll change everything, sort of. Although, even if you do that, I don't know if that really precludes you from getting a guy like Rubio.
No,
so,
I think...
I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think Ja Morant would definitely change the type of point guard the Suns might chase, but you'd be looking for more of a veteran guy, stopgap, while Morant develops. So that might change, I guess, the number one priorities for sure. So that's a decent point by you there.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know yet. I'm still processing my thoughts on this. I still think Lonzo Ball is really interesting for the Suns because even if the Lakers don't end up getting Anthony Davis, there's some stuff going on there with Lonzo and that organization. And it wouldn't totally shock me if he were traded. Did you see that story about how Magic Johnson didn't really want him and was convinced by Jeannie Buss to take him, and the allegations were because of marketing reasons?
I did not see that story, and that's very, very interesting. I'm glad you brought Lonzo Ball up because my last note in this section here is Ball will be available again, ? And I think you've nailed it on the head there.
Yeah, it would not shock me if he is, especially around the draft time. I think I could see. So here's something that would be really interesting. Say the Suns end up fourth, right, in the lottery, and Lakers are obviously back channeling with the Pelicans, and if they realize that the Pelicans would value the fourth pick in the draft more than they'd value Lonzo Ball, then all of a sudden, that's an interesting discussion.
Yep, for sure. But let's move on, and we'll have plenty of time for that discussion in the future, I'm sure.
Yes, we will. All right, David, give us some Did You Know?
Well, Max, I always like to work in the theme of the current episode into Did You Know? So, of course, this week we're going to discuss Tyler Johnson. But, Max, did you know Tyler Johnson will become the Suns' highest paid player this season at $19.3 million? He signed an Arenas rule offer sheet with Brooklyn in restricted free agency for $50 million total, which meant the final 2 years were at a much higher rate. He takes over that mantle from Ryan Anderson, who was traded the other way to Miami, as we said, and will still hold the title of the highest paid player on the team's books for the season at $20.4 million. Ryan Anderson, that is. Devin Booker's likely to hold that title for the next 5 years, though, when his extension kicks in. But Max, how many of the highest paid Suns can you name since the team last made the playoffs? I'll give you a little clue. There's 6 players over 8 seasons who have ended the season as the highest paid player on the Suns. Who have you got for me?
Bledsoe?
Yep, so 3 seasons for Bledsoe, 12 million, 13 million, and 14 million from 15 to 2017.
If it's since they made the playoffs, that would still include Nash, right?
No, Nash isn't included. I'll bring the next guy in here. Vince Carter at 18.3 million and 17.3 million in 2011 and 2010.
That's insane. Okay, does Brandon Knight, is he on there?
Brandon Knight doesn't make it in, unfortunately.
Greg Monroe?
Greg Monroe last season, 16.3 million. So we've got 2 to go, and I'd be very surprised if you get either.
Can you give me the years?
In 13-14 and 12-13.
Jeez. Man. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pass on this one, David. Who is it?
Emeka Okafor at 14.4 million in 2013, and Goran Dragic earned $7.5 million in 2013 and was the highest paid player on the Phoenix Suns.
That sounds nearly impossible.
Yep, there was a large chunk of guys that all earned around that mark, so that's how the cap got filled up. But now back to Tyler Johnson, Max. Undrafted in 2014, Johnson went to college at Fresno State, who also produced my favorite player in the NBA, Paul George. He only had 3 draft workouts in the lead up to the draft. The Lakers, where he was basically the chair for a Dante Exum workout, I read. The Warriors, where he was from, and the main front office staff weren't even in attendance for that workout, apparently. And then the Miami Heat. Despite going undrafted, he did end up on the Heat's Summer League team, then on their G League affiliate, before eventually signing a pair of 10-day contracts in January 2015 and a full deal a month later in February. It was only a month after that, in March, when Tyler Johnson scored his season high in points of 26 against none other than the Phoenix Suns. His points high has since increased to 32, but Johnson's career high in steals still comes against the Suns when he had 5 in March of 2017, Max. Now, we saw him wear number 16 in his debut for the Suns against the Warriors, becoming just the 3rd Sun to wear that number, behind 2 guys I'd never heard of, Max, so I'm not going to ask you who they were.
That's nice
It was Lamar Green in 69 to 74 and Georgi Klushkov in 1985.
I love Georgi Klushkov, one of my all-time favorites.
The number 8 he wore in Miami was already taken by George King, and numbers 6 and 33 from his Fresno State days are retired in Phoenix in dedication to Walter Davis and Alvin Adams. I'm sure anyone seeing him for the first time the other night noticed he is another lefty, joining Ali Akobo and Kelly Oubre on the current roster. But Max, I wanted to ask you and the listeners as well to think about it. Who's your favorite Suns lefty, either current or from the past?
Oh, man, I got to think about that. Well, current, it's just Kelly Oubre by a mile. I'm in love with Kelly Oubre right now. I don't care if he's good or not. Give that guy all the money. I just love him.
Yep.
All time, I got to think about that. What's your answer?
I'd probably go Goran.
Okay. You know who I ruined? Not with the Suns. I loved Michael Redd a lot.
Ooh.
He wasn't great with the Suns, but I loved him.
Yeah, and he sneaks in as a Sun, so we'll take his whole career there. So, yeah, that's a great answer. I like that one. But before and during his time in the NBA, though, Max, Tyler Johnson has thoroughly deserved his reputation as a hard-working, no-nonsense player who has deserved everything that came his way. He first lost 2 teeth on the court during his sophomore college season when a guy landed on the back of his head, Max, and forced his teeth into the hardwood of the court.
Good God. He got curb stomped.
Johnson says he's lost 6 or 7 teeth now, with the last when he suffered a broken jaw in 2015 with the Heat. He's had his fair share of injuries and earned his tough image within the league, which culminates, Max, in my favourite Tyler Johnson story that I've read so far, and it was while he was rehabbing from a torn rotator cuff with the Heat. Renowned as the kind of guy who did extra sessions on his own, Heat coach Eric Spoelstra had to bring Johnson into his office and show him arena security footage of Johnson being caught coming into the gym around midnight to do on-court work when he was supposed to be staying off to rehab his shoulder.
Wow.
Johnson's going to set a great example for the Suns' young core, I think, and at just 26 years old, as we said, he becomes one of their vets. Now, Max, after talking about Tyler's incredible journey to the NBA, it was only fair to tie in one last bonus did you know fact to end the segment. So, did you know Tyler Johnson is the 47th highest paid player in the NBA for this current season? And did you know he's the highest paid undrafted player in the entire league, Max?
Wow.
That's right, he's the only undrafted player in the top 50. A top 50 that includes 6 number 1 picks, 26 further lottery picks, 11 more first round picks, and 6 second round picks. So to end, Max, how many of the second round picks in the top 50 highest paid players can you name? There's 6.
Does Jokic's contract is kicked in already or no?
Yes, that's 1.
Okay. Is Draymond up there?
He is not quite.
Not quite. He's a little under TJ, right?
Just under.
Yeah. I remember he signed something kind of under market. God, who are the other really good second round picks? This is annoying me now. All right. I'm mad at myself because I should have gotten a few of these, but go ahead.
Another Miami player.
Oh, it's got to be Whiteside. Yeah.
Whiteside, yep. Another big that was just traded to the Knicks.
Who was just traded to the Knicks? DeAndre Jordan.
Correct. Another big that was just traded and we're about to talk about very soon to Toronto, Max.
Marc Gasol. I forgot he's second rounder.
Correct. Another Memphis player who I believe is rejoining the team after they couldn't dump his horrible contract.
Oh, Parsons.
Yep. And along with Jokic, another Denver Nugget, Max.
Millsap. Isn't Millsap like one of the highest paid players in the entire league?
Yep, and he was drafted at number 47.
Wow.
So that's it, Max. Time to jump into the rest of the trade deadline from a league-wide point of view, as we said.
Awesome. Thanks, David. That was fun. I like I like how you give me clues that time. That was nice of you. All right, so yeah, we're going to jump into the Around the NBA thing. We're not going to talk about every single trade because, as David said, there were 21 of them, and a lot of them were interesting. Mm-hmm. The keys here are going to be what the main 4 in the East did, because I think that's not only going to be the story of the trade deadline, it's going to be maybe the story of the season.
Yep.
As these 4 teams, the Philadelphia 76ers, Milwaukee Bucks, Toronto Raptors, Boston Celtics, seem inevitably headed for a second-round Eastern matchup for the ages. And only one of them didn't really do a major move. We'll get to them last.
Yep.
Let's start with the Philadelphia 76ers, who probably made the biggest move. David, we talked a little bit already. I mentioned that I thought it was like one of those trades that took a while to process, to develop an opinion on. But do you want to talk a little bit about your initial thoughts and then maybe how your thoughts have changed, if they have?
Yeah, this is the perfect one, as you brought up earlier in the episode, where my initial reaction was, wow, that is a ridiculous amount to give up for Tobias Harris. I think I even tweeted something along the lines of, I guess that's star hunting, because the Miami pick was included, which they obviously referenced with that Suns trade that they were going to use it to hunt a star. So, I love the Harris fit on Philly. I'm still thinking that they maybe gave up a little bit too much than what they had to the Clippers, but Philly's all in. They're just going for this, and I think it's a great move.
Yep.
Probably the best starting 5 in the East now, Max. I don't think that's too hot of a take.
I agree with that. I think it's close with the Bucks, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree.
I love that Boban stays with Tobias Harris. They're both unrestricted free agents too, so there should be a deal there for both of them. Marai brothers style, I think, there. But
you also gotta love Boban joining Embiid. Like, what a buddy cop movie that would be.
Yeah. But there's a lot for Brett Brown to work out in these last kind of 20, 25 games. I think it's a huge play if Harris works, but if it doesn't, he can walk away, and they've just given up a pretty massive package, which we should say includes your boy Landry Shamet, a 2020 first, the Miami pick, and 2 seconds on top of that. So it's a really big package here, Max.
Yeah, and so I guess since you focus on Philadelphia, I'll focus on the Clippers. I will very quickly say that I think it's like I get it for Philly. They're going all in. I give it like a B for them. It's a risky gamble, but I could definitely pay off.
Yep.
But for the Clippers, it's just like an A plus 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 plus. Put a million pluses on the end of that.
Yeah.
Like, they could not have done better here. I think they would have been okay signing Harris in free agency if they didn't get their bigger fish. But I think they're plan A, obviously. They're trying to go after the big guys like Durant, Kawhi, Irving, Davis. That's their main goal here. And they just gave themselves just a much better chance at that.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty telling that it seemed like as soon as this trade happened, the Lakers-Pelicans talks were just dead. Because now the Pelicans have another team in the bidding no matter what next summer. Because the nightmare scenario for the Pelicans was going to be they get stuck with, Kyrie leaves Boston and all you have is the Lakers now.
Yeah.
So then they can just lower their offer. But now you're guaranteed to have a couple teams in the bidding now because the Clippers are going to be in it. So it's a huge win for the Pelicans actually, but also a huge win for the Clippers. The Clippers are now going to have. I did some rough back of the envelope calculations on their salary cap, David.
Yep.
If they do a trade centered around Gallinari around the draft and are able to, say their lottery pick ends up being, assuming they stay in the lottery, ends up being, decent. Say they get number 4, something they get lucky.
Yep.
They can make a draft day deal centered around Gallinari and that pick and all the assets they got in this trade. And I think they could still preserve room for 2 max slots around Davis, which would just be absolutely ridiculous. Because I think the roster, now, especially now that they made the trade Avery Bradley.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure they could get to the point where they basically just have Anthony Davis in the roster, and that's it.
That would be something to see for sure. And I think with Gallo, even we can't rule out that the Pelicans are going to want some sort of mixture of ready to go guys plus draft capital. So he may even be a valuable contract to use in the Anthony Davis.
He also expires next year. He's really good for them.
So perfect. Which is I think where the Lakers fall down. They've kind of got all these young guys that haven't reached their potential, and they also don't really have any kind of existing guys to ship over to the Pelicans. But pivoting back to Philly here, I think it's a bit of an audition for both Harris and Butler. I'm not convinced, even though they have said that they're going to, try and re-sign all 4 guys. I'm not convinced that's the case. I feel like it's maybe even a bit of an audition for which one fits better with Embiid and Simmons, Max. So if you could only have one of the 2 going forward in Philly at the same amount of money, who would you pick?
I've seen this question posed on Twitter and polls and stuff. I think it's fascinating.
Yep.
Because Jimmy Butler, I think, is pretty clearly a better player right now.
Yep.
But, man, Harris is... everyone says this. It's one of those people forgets that people say that all the time, so no one's forgetting it. Mm-hmm. But Tobias Harris is young. He's 26 still.
Yeah.
And that fits a little better with the Embiid-Simmons timeline, for sure. And maybe also has a little more upside. Players can get better at that age. Tobias Harris himself has gotten a lot better over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and he's only one more leap away from a team finally believing in him and not trying to flip him over to another team. But
I think it's Harris. But just to answer your question, though, I think it's Harris. I think it's Harris for me.
Yeah, I've gone Harris too, purely from the shooting and the age perspective, which you brought up. I think both of those 2 kind of tip the scales.
He's also not a dick, from what I know. Which helps.
One of the nicest guys in the NBA, if you kind of believe everything that you read when these guys get moved. You don't see things get said about Jimmy Butler that got said about Tobias Harris when he got traded again from the Clippers. But
I have one for you. This is kind of random, but say they sign both those guys again, both of them, and it's kind of like they're still not good enough. What if the Portland thing flames out, do you think there's a chance we see a Lillard-Simmons trade? For some reason, I just have that in my mind.
I keep coming back to Simmons. You know, you were one of the first people that I saw float him as potentially being trade fodder for Philly at some point, and this is the last offseason, I believe, that they can use his rookie deal. That's why they can potentially afford to re-sign Butler and Harris, and then decisions need to get made. So, yeah, that's an interesting one. I think Simmons, they're potentially trying to build a team much like the next team we're about to jump onto around using Simmons' skills, but the fit still isn't amazing there. And, I definitely think we could see Simmons get moved in a year or so's time.
These playoffs are going to be very fascinating because in last year's playoffs, I think everyone knows now that Ben Simmons got a bit exposed by the Celtics.
Yep.
And we're going to see if he's grown enough. He obviously doesn't shoot still, so we'll see if he's figured out another way to overcome the kind of thing the Celtics do. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on. You alluded to him. Let's go to the Milwaukee Bucks, who I think had, maybe aside from the Clippers, my favorite trade deadline because, man, even though New Orleans got a lot from Mirotic, that's just a great trade for the Bucks, man. Nikola Mirotic fits perfectly. He provides the spacing around Giannis. He's a good defender, underrated defender. He's just perfect on that team, David.
I love the fit, and I love that we didn't see it coming. There was a lot of teams linked to Mirotic, and I don't really think the Bucks were one of the main ones that you often saw. You kind of saw Philly. You saw the next team that we're about to talk about, Toronto, which reportedly did go after Mirotic and were beaten by the Bucks in what they
Philly
offered.
did too. I don't know if you saw that story.
Yeah, so interesting that the Bucks were able to piece together a deal that beat a lot of the competitors for Mirotic. I think 4 second rounders is a decent package along with Thon Maker. Well, I guess Stanley Johnson was the guy that went to the Pelicans, but Thon Maker was the one that went out from the Bucks. But I just love that they're continuing to build around Giannis. He's had a monster season, which he gets a lot of credit for and deserves to. But it's also got a lot to do with this team that they're building around him. I just wrote down all the names that we'll probably see in the playoffs from this team and a lot of flexibility. They got Brook Lopez, Brogdon, Bledsoe, George Hill, Middleton, Ilyasova, and then the young guys in Wilson, DiVincenzo, and Sterling Brown. It just gives them so many options going into the playoffs to throw different teams around and I guess counter whoever they're playing in the first, second, or maybe even the conference or the finals, Max. So I guess my question for you here is, what is their ultimate lineup? Because I think there's a few different ways you can go with this one.
So you're talking about the closing lineup in the playoffs, basically?
Yeah, and let's they will obviously change things for who they're playing, but if it's all about making the other team match you, what do you think the best 5 for Milwaukee is?
That's really interesting, and I think we're gonna. I want to see some experimentation here, but I think it's gonna be for sure. You're gonna have Middleton and Giannis in there, obviously.
Yep.
Probably Bledsoe. He's still their best. He's their best guard.
Yep.
Man, that's where it gets tough. Like I love what Brook Lopez brings for them as a stretch big. I should throw in Mirotic too. Mirotic is obviously one of their best 5 players at this point.
Yep.
So it's really just who's the 5th guy, right?
Pretty much. I've got Bledsoe, Middleton, Giannis, Mirotic, and I won't tell you who my 5th guy is until you answer.
Yeah, I just think it's really hard. I mean, because I could see them wanting to play with Mirotic and Giannis at the bigs.
Yep.
And going smaller and put Brogdon in there maybe. Mm-hmm. But then it obviously, like we talked about, it's going to depend on who they're playing against. Because I see Brook Lopez in there too. Who's your 5th though?
I've got Lopez because I think that just creates all kind of problems for whoever you're playing. But I think
another thing too, real quick, and I'll let you go on. The East all of a sudden has some really terrorizing bigs, right? You got Embiid, you got Marc Gasol in Toronto. You need to counter that, and I think you might need a big guy like Lopez to even sort of function against those teams.
Yeah, exactly. Brogdon's the obvious, pivot choice there, I think. But yeah, that 5's pretty scary around Giannis for sure. And as we're going to get into, the second round in the East is going to be just nuts.
Oh, it's going to be so good. I'm actually, the West is a better conference, but I'm much more excited for the second round in the East. It's going to be.
Yeah.
I can see. So let me ask you this, David. For who would you pick out of those 4 teams to come out? Maybe I should have waited on this question for the rest of the discussion, but I just want to hear your opinion on this now. Who's your pick?
This is a great segue into our next team. So I'm happily going to answer it because I was going to going to ask you the exact same question at the end of our Toronto section, but it's still Toronto for me, which I guess we can jump into the deal that they made and why, and then maybe you can give your answer before we jump into the rest of the East and Boston.
Yeah, sure. So it was Valanciunas, CJ Miles, and DeLon Wright for Marc Gasol. Do I have that right? And was there like a second round, or was it just the players?
There's a second round pick in there too.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, it's interesting. It's basically they're upgrading from Valanciunas to Gasol, and the prize there is DeLon Wright going out. I think it's a no-brainer for the Raptors, honestly. You got to go for the upside, and Masai knows that. This team, as presently constituted, could have made the finals, but I think now that they have Marc Gasol in there, Marc Gasol can just, go back in the time machine and grab some of that Defensive Player of the Year form that he has. This team could just be unstoppable defensively. They could just be insane.
I'm really glad you brought up the time machine there, because a lot of the negativity towards this trade I've seen is, people saying that Gasol's not that great of an upgrade on Valanciunas and not that great of an upgrade on, I guess, what their best starting five is. And I'll make 2 points there. I think if you remember back to the start of the season, the Marc Gasol that everyone was raving about before Memphis kind of fell off a cliff, I think he can tap back into that, and I don't think we can discount that, the falling off a cliff maybe had a lot to do with the fact that, he was seeing that he wasn't long for Memphis for very long, so maybe he left a little bit in the tank that we might see come playoff time. And then, my only other point is, you can bench Gasol. I've seen a lot of negativity towards it. Basically means that they're forced to start Gasol, and they probably will be for the rest of the regular season. But smart teams and smart coaches, they change their lineups up for the playoff matchup, and I don't think it necessarily means that we won't see, say, an Ibaka Siakam front court for certain matchups. You touched on it before. There are some bigs in the East now, so Gasol's perfect for someone like Embiid and then even Brook Lopez. But then when Boston goes small, when Milwaukee goes small, there's no reason why you can't bring Gasol off the bench. I just don't see that line of thinking of why you would be overly negative towards this trade.
Yeah, I don't think you're giving out too much. I like DeLon Wright a lot. He's good, but it's worth the upgrade in my opinion to an ex-All-Star who could really put you over the top. Also, CJ Miles has been really bad this year.
Really bad.
They wasn't giving anything up.
They already paid Van Vliet, so they probably weren't going to be able to pay DeLon Wright anyway.
And also, I haven't watched a whole lot of Memphis versus Toronto or Memphis versus Philly in my day, but I've heard that Gasol actually defends Embiid very, very well. One of the better defenders against him.
So it just gives them, that big beast tool, which they essentially didn't have. Valanciunas is good and has been better, but I'm much more comfortable going as a defensive matchup with Marc Gasol going up against Embiid than I would be with Valanciunas for sure. And as I said, you can still go small at times when the matchup fits. So hit us, Max, before we jump into Boston, because I doubt you're gonna pick them. Who's your favorite to come out of the East after all these deals?
So it's so close. My buddy actually had me put percentage odds on the floor, and I had Toronto and Milwaukee tied at 30% chance.
Yep.
Boston and Philly tied at 20% chance.
Okay.
So I think this is just incredibly close, but it just a gun to my head, forced to choose. I think I'm going to go with Giannis. I think I'm going to go with Milwaukee just because I just love that way that team's built, and I think Giannis is going to have. You remember that the playoff run? I'm sure you do. When LeBron got to the finals with that shit team and had that 47 points, whatever it was in Detroit. I think we're getting one of those out of Giannis this playoffs. I think it's going to be like a coming out party. Although he's already out, but like a super duper take over the conference coming out party.
Yeah, I think LeBron's team that often pops up on the timeline still with just how bad that roster was. That LeBron,
oh God, Boobie Gibson.
I think the Bucks team isn't going to be looked at in 10 years' time with those YouTube clips of how bad the lineup was, because they've built a great team around Giannis, and that's why I can't argue with that. Even though I'm going with Toronto, it's a pretty it's like picking your favorite kid when you're going through these teams. But
I hope that's the Eastern Conference Finals, the Toronto Milwaukee. That'd be so.
Me
good.
too. I hope the standings kind of fall out in a way that we get the best matchup for the Eastern Conference Finals. But
let me ask you real quick before we go on. What would your favorite matchup be in the second round between these four teams? What two do you want to see play each other?
Ooh.
I think I want Boston and Philly to have a rematch. Those two teams just hate each other. I love that.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, but then realized that...
then that makes the Bucks Raptors.
Yeah, that means we don't get Bucks Raptors in the finals. So, for selfish reasons, I'll say instead Bucks Boston. So we get hopefully the Bucks through to the Eastern Conference Finals. And a great pivot again there, I think, to kind of my big question here with Boston essentially standing pat or, not being able to chase AD at the deadline. I think, this, with how tight this Eastern Conference is and all these teams making these kind of all-in moves, there's going to be so much riding on the results of these Eastern Conference Finals and whether teams get blown up, whether there's, firings to either GMs or coaches because of the results, and one game here or there is going to define this conference, I think, for years to come, just based off where it goes in the playoffs here. Because I think if Boston take a step back and get knocked out in that second round, I think can be looked at as a little bit of a disaster for them. And these teams, particularly Mirotic is probably a tier down with what they gave up and the type of player that he is, but with Philly going after Harris and Toronto going after Gasol, again, if they go out in the second round, it could mean Toronto going full rebuild, and it could be some tough decisions for Philly with who they re-sign for that roster, Max.
Yeah, and even the Bucks, which I think I agree with you, what you're implying here is they're the most solid of these teams.
Yeah.
Going forward, even so, everyone thinks Giannis is going to be there forever. Next year's trade deadline, he'll be in the same exact contractual position that Davis was this year.
Mm-hmm.
So, Giannis ain't that far away from asking out if that's what he's intending to do. And if the Bucks say they somehow got upset in the first round, I just don't see how that's possible, but it did happen. Man, and say they start next year kind of poorly too, all of a sudden you're in a scary place. So totally agree with you. These four teams have so much riding on this playoffs. And real quick, let's just focus a little bit on Boston here, because I'm not the first person to make this point, but I think it's very obvious that they were a winner of the trade deadline just because Anthony Davis didn't get traded.
Yep.
And, man, they have to be the favorites to get Davis now, right? Because it does seem like the smoke is that they're willing to put Tatum in the deal. And if they get the indication from Kyrie that he'll re-sign if Davis is traded for, I think that's got to be the favorite right now.
Yeah, I think so. I think Clutch and Davis are doing their best to get Boston off the scent, because it sounds like every chance they're getting, they're saying that he won't re-sign there. But the other interesting thing from me here, and this is a really small nerdy thing, but the Clippers pick is lottery protected, and they look like they're going to tank to keep that.
Yep.
The Memphis pick is top 8 protected. The Sacramento Philly pick, it's the more favorable one, I believe. But, Sacramento are having a much better season than Boston would have anticipated at the start of the season there. So that's interesting. So what the actual AD package looks like kind of hurts Boston. And if they have a bad playoffs on top of that, it's going to be panic stations for them, I think.
Yeah, I think they were really hoping. Obviously they were really hoping that they were going to be able to get Davis without giving up Jason Tatum.
Yeah,
but I think now that you made a great point there with those picks, they've all lost. Pretty much all of them are looking worse, and I just don't think they can build a package without Tatum in it that's going to trump the Clippers or even probably the Lakers. So,
yeah, that's the point here. Is it's Tatum or no trade, I think, and Pelicans. I think they made the right move in the end, not doing the deal, because you've got the Lakers. You've got the Clippers, who we've touched on quite a bit, I think being a big, huge player in both this and free agency for the summer. Then you throw in Boston, and then I think the lottery is probably going to say whether it's a 4-team race, because if someone like the Knicks get the number 1 pick, then all of a sudden the Pelicans are going to have multiple packages to choose from, and I think therefore everyone will look back on this trade deadline and applaud them for not making the Lakers move. If and only if, Max, and this will be the last point that I'll make for the pod, Davis doesn't get injured, because him playing for the Pelicans is pretty interesting right now.
I cannot believe they're playing him. And the rumor came out that the NBA threatened to fine them like $250,000 a game or whatever it was. That's absurd.
Yeah, I think they've been bullied a little bit by the NBA and the Players Association here. I think it was $100,000 a game, and I actually saw a really interesting tweet. Someone basically said that's $2.4 to $2.7 million, I think, based on how many games the Pelicans have left. You'd maybe just eat that fine.
Yeah, worth it.
And the extra point they made is like sell. What did we see Golden State buy that Bulls pick for?
$3 million.
$3 million. So sell one or two of those second round picks that you got for Mirotic, pay the fine, and risk him getting injured because this is not a good situation for the Pelicans right now.
I'm surprised Rich Paul wants Davis to play if he does. I'm surprised that Davis is playing. No, it doesn't benefit anyone for Anthony Davis to be playing right now, other than the NBA wants, obviously their stars to play. But it doesn't benefit either party here. We're talking about Davis and the team. If he got injured, like a serious injury, say he had a Paul George, that would be catastrophic, man.
Yep, and I think it's just total vindictiveness from Rich Paul and Davis here for the Pelicans not moving him when they wanted him to. They're just going to threaten to play him. They can obviously still manage his minutes and stuff, but it's just a risk that you wouldn't really want to be taking if you're the Pelicans, and it's pretty unfortunate, that whole scenario now.
Yeah, I don't love it. My last point I want to do on the podcast is off your point about the lottery. This lottery night is going to be an all-timer coming up. Because, first of all, it's a winner-take-all lottery, basically, because everyone knows Zion's the guy.
Yep.
It's not like last year where there was some debate. It's all Zion here.
Yep.
And there were some interesting franchises involved. The Davis trade element is interesting with the Clippers and the Knicks. Mm-hmm. So it's gonna be fun. I hate lottery night because I'm a Suns fan. But it's going to be a fun one this year. I'm going to try to enjoy it as best I can.
Yeah, it's the Zion race, and it has major implications now, particularly with this Davis stuff. So, that's going to be a fun one to look out for, and there'll be some nervous Suns fans, I'm sure, because no matter how we go for the rest of the season, we're probably going to have around a 15% chance at landing that top pick, Max.
Yep. As far as I've seen from Suns fans, they think we basically have a 0% chance. That's how they feel. All right, David, should we move on to 7 seconds or less?
Let's do it.
All right, so 7 seconds or less is the segment where one of us asks the other 3 questions for which the other has 7 seconds or less to answer and has not prepared beforehand. David, this week it is your turn to ask me the questions.
It is, and I touched on this much earlier in the episode, but I hate the buyout rule, Max, and the market that it's created. And we already saw with Phoenix, with Chandler, Rivers, and then Allington, that players kind of hold all the power here. But with that little whinge out of the way, I'm going to do a quick buyout game with 7 players from 7 seconds or less. And I want you to very quickly name a team that they might sign with after being bought out by their current team. So Markieff Morris has already been bought out by the Pelicans.
Phoenix. Just kidding. How about the Lakers? I can see you on the Lakers.
Okay, Shelvin Mack, who's going to be bought out by Atlanta.
God, who needs a guard? Does Utah need a guard?
Yeah.
I'll go with Utah.
Okay.
I'll go with
He's
Utah.
got history there. This guy hasn't been bought out yet, but it's probably one of the more interesting ones. Robin Lopez with the Chicago Bulls.
Ooh, how about he go backs up his brother in Milwaukee? That'd be kind of fun.
I've seen a few people say that would be a fun one. Enes Kanter has been bought out by the Knicks.
I'm seeing a lot of ties with him to the Celtics, which I guess. I don't like Enes Kanter, and I don't think he really makes sense anywhere, so I'll just say that.
Okay. Marcin Gortat was weirdly waived by the Clippers to create a roster spot.
I totally missed that. I actually like him better on the Celtics, so I'll put him there instead, and Enes Kanter can go to...
The Thunder.
I don't know,
Send him to the Thunder.
Please, no. How about the Hornets? They need a big man. How about the Hornets for Enes?
Nice. Michael Beasley, will he find another team?
God, probably. Yeah, God, I hate to say this, you just brought them up, but the Thunder could use some scoring, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
I don't like that.
And I think this guy actually just signed a 10-day, so I'll skip him. I've got some spares here. I was going to say Ben McLemore, but I believe he's already signed a 10-day. I think it was with Toronto. Yep. So I'll let you pick one more out of these 3 spares. Greg Monroe, Nick Stauskas, and Zach Randolph.
Good God, those are spares, aren't they? Oof. Stauskas, maybe he gets one more shot on a team that could use some shooting. I'm thinking maybe Utah or OKC.
Okay. Yep.
I'm surprised you didn't mention Melo.
No, well, I think it's there's only one answer there, but OKC did just waive Alex Abrinas before we jumped on, so yeah, Stauskas there could be an interesting one, but still going to give you a couple more questions here. So number 2, if you were the GM at this deadline, what is one move you would have pushed hard to get done for the Phoenix Suns? I'll give the caveat that still has to be in the context of the deadline. So, AD is staying in New Orleans, for instance, and you got to work around that.
I would have pushed really, really hard, and maybe they did, and it just was not possible. But I would have pushed as hard as I possibly could for Lonzo.
Yeah,
I think everybody knows that already. But I would have this year's pick was on the table for me.
Yep.
TJ, I don't maybe even TJ and Josh. I would have gone really hard for him because I think that's what they need.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I've only just thought of that. But if the AD deal had fallen over well before the last day, and the Lakers obviously want to try and make the playoffs here, guys like TJ Warren and stuff might have actually been valuable to the Lakers.
Yeah, the problem there is they have to be sure they can move him, right?
Yeah.
Because they want the free agency space.
Exactly. And teams would see that coming and kind of hold them over a barrel a little bit, perhaps.
Yep.
But question 3 to finish here. The Suns can't trade now until their season ends, and likely not until draft night, Max. So what is the next trade the Phoenix Suns make, and when will it be?
They'll probably make a draft night trade. What is it? I think I don't know if I can give you a specific person because that's tough. I think that a draft night trade of their own pick for a more established point guardish person makes some sense to me.
Yep.
I'm trying to figure out who that would be. Maybe even, I know the Pelicans are saying all the things about wanting to keep Holiday around, but if they make a draft night Davis trade and decide we're going full rebuild, maybe it could be Drew Holiday.
Yep. He's been traded on draft night already before, I believe. So,
yeah.
I like that one. I wouldn't be surprised, just to give my answer here, similar thing. I think if we don't land the number 1 pick, then our pick is definitely tradable on draft night, and maybe for a power forward that we haven't even thought of just yet, and then they go to point guard in the free agency market, Max.
That's interesting. I'm trying to think of who that could possibly... Maybe like Bobby Portis, if Washington doesn't want to pay him, would be interesting. If the pick's not good at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
Plenty to think about there for Suns fans.
Yep, but that's enough for us to speak about.
Yes.
We're going to sign off here. Please, as always, rate, review, and subscribe. David, are there any recent reviews?
There are. One in Australia. Raphael's girlfriend is the username, so shout out to Raphael's girlfriend. And 2 in the US, which we're not going to read out, but happy for them to give us the review with the 5-star. So thanks to Big Sun and also Sun Sphere who reviewed us.
Read out Big Sun. I like to thank Big Sun for his generous contribution to my Twitter bio now. And also, hey, to be fair, I asked for criticism as long as we got 5 stars, and Big Sun gave us 5 stars.
That's true.
And I'll take the criticism. And I am a bit too much sometimes. David, did you see my Twitter feed last night?
We're all a little bit too much sometimes, but appreciate you listening and reviewing. And if anyone else wants to do that, we will continue to give you a shout out on the pod, Max.
Yes, we will.
One last question for you, Max.
Okay.
Little mini stretch here. 2 games before the All-Star and then some winnable ones after. We got Sacramento, the Clippers, the Cavs, Atlanta, Miami, and the Pelicans. What is your prediction for the next 6 games record-wise?
That's a really winnable stretch of games, isn't it?
It
is. Really
interesting.
It's the Suns, so I can't give them a 500 record, but I'll go 2-4 just because some of those teams are pretty beatable.
All right, I'm going to go 3-3. Ever the positive person as a Suns fan. So that is all now, Max.
I like it. I hope you're right and I'm wrong, as usual, I'd say. Thanks, guys.